Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing again? It's me, Russell Mills. This October 13th, 2024, on a Sunday. I just found out that legendary baseball player Pete Rose just passed away. So I'm going to play you guys some highlights.
Yeah, it's so well done, Tom. Appreciate that. And there's a lot here with Pete. Obviously, we were teammates with him. We'll get to that in a second. But how about Pete the player? I know you had a long relationship with him before we worked together here at Fox.
Kevin, this is, Poppy texted me right away when the news hit last week. And this was very tough because Pete was very good to me. And I learned so much about Pete Rose. But you look at Steve Jobs, what he meant to computers is what Pete Rose meant to baseball. And I'm just talking about in between the lines. You had millions of kids trying to hit like him, slide like him, emulate. He was like the perfect baseball player. And not the most talent, but the biggest heart. And Poppy, I remember having many, many conversations, sometimes 90 minutes, about hitting a baseball, about approach, about not giving a bat away. And I'll never forget, he said, Alex, my favorite day in baseball is opening day and a doubleheader because I get to get 10 at-bats to do what I do.
Absolutely. I know the relationship between the two of you. I barely got to know Pete, but I got to tell you, he was a good deliverer. I was sitting down with my dad, watching a documentary about him during that one All-Star game when he knocked out his compadre. And the message was, the longest you play this game, you got to go 110 miles an hour in it. You got to give everything you have. You got to begin to be the best competitor that you can be out there. So the people that are paying to come and watch you play, they go home thinking that their ticket was worth it. And that was the message that Pete Rose delivered.
I tell you, I didn't know Pete that well. The first thing that comes to mind is Charlie Hustle. He played hard. Like Tom mentioned, he played brutally hard. But there's a couple things. If you ever remember, anytime somebody got 3,000 hits, Pete would always come out and say, well, the first 3,000 are easy. And then I got a chance to, I was playing at a celebrity softball game at Yogi Berra's museum, and I was an honorary first base coach, and Pete was playing in it. And Pete got a hit, and he rounded first base, and he came back, and he tells me, just another lousy hit. That is perfect, because I can totally see him saying that, right? That is beautiful. Look, we did spend 2 seasons here at Fox with Pete. He kept us on our toes. I can promise you that. You just never knew what was going to come out of his mouth next. Let's watch.
I'm going to die as the hit king. Once I'm gone, I really don't give a damn if someone beats my record, okay?
Pete, show me how you would face the Mets pitchers. Show me the stats.
I just hit that ball right to left field.
Charlie Hustle.
Just run my ass.
We have a problem.
Better as far as what's more conducive to pitching, but I don't think this is an issue. But we saw it with Kershaw. Bullet. I'm going to probably stretch that a little bit. Pete, you were trending on Twitter. Let's take a look at this photo. You'll enjoy it. What? Let's take a look at this.
That's the second best zoo.
How do they rate that? Is it?
I'll tell you why. Because Marshawn, when she died, she gave the zoo $75 million. She didn't give me a dime. She gave them $75 million. So I gave her. Just give that money away like disgusting.
I'm so sorry. I did that.
This start a Pete Rose TV channel, just a camera on him 24/7. Gonna make $1 gazillion. Pete, you in?
That's a smart man right there.
We have a new segment tonight. It's a segment we like to call Don't Bet on It. And what it is
Wonder who that was named after.
I don't know. I have no idea.
They just have it going. They feel like a world championship team.
I'm great you got to go in there. I'm not allowed in the clubhouse. I'm allowed in the bar, but I'm not allowed in the clubhouse. I got to go back to L.A. Alex won't let me get on his G5. Can you get me on the Alex charter?
I love the optics of Zobrist and Kyle Schwartzberg.
We got a new player in the lineup somewhere? Who's Schwartzberg?
Oh, laugh this hard. Are we on TV?
Look at it. It's pouring right now. So we got lucky.
It's a great night if you're a duck. I was a chicken.
This is game one. All of our notes are gone.
We're dead. We're dead. We're the winning city, baby.
We're in some trouble
Go
now.
home. Can we go home now? Feel like a man. There's something about a night will fell for man. Fell for man.
Man, those are some fun times. D-Train Dontrell Willis joins us now. Train, we all worked with Pete together. What do you remember most?
You know what? The shock value and the love and the passion that he had for his fellow sport. You know, I put him in the area of the Ric Flairs and the Charles Barkleys, where you never knew what they were going to say on air, but they were going to stand on business when they said it. And when you talk about this, the essence of baseball, he had that expectation even when he was watching and breaking down baseball. He expected guys to play hard, not take days off and what have you. And so I love every time I was on there, we would have a meeting and then we get out there and I had this shock value and I would turn white because some of the lines he had was the legendary one-liners, but nevertheless, he was very good to me. He was fun-loving and we will definitely miss him.
Yeah, and Kevin, you know this. He's one of the most confident human beings on the planet. And he would tell a story about how he would push Mike Schmidt and he would tell Mike Schmidt, if I had that talent, I would never be nervous. But one, and there's a million stories, but one that stands out was Pete Rose Jr. playing in the minor leagues, and he's struggling. And he phones Dad, and he goes, Dad, I need your advice. I've been really, really struggling. And he said, what's up, son? He goes, I'm 0 for 21. Can you help me? He goes, well, why the hell are you calling me? I've never been 0 for 21. Call Dave Conception. But that was Pete.
And that's so true. And by the way, as a host, I know shock value because I'm like, oh, take it easy, Pete. But I'll give you one of my favorites. This is from off the air, right? This was 2016. We're in Chicago for their run, the pennant to the World Series. We're basically in Chicago for weeks. And we had our set out by Murph out there beyond center field. And so we would drive, we had one of the ex-Chicago PD driving us in. And then for the World Series, they got the security a little tighter. They had barricades. So we pull on up that day, and I was in the back seat, and Pete was in the front with Nick, who was driving us. And the officers there said, excuse me, sir, do you have any credentials? And Pete he goes, phase. I'm like, oh my God, it's Pete Rose. You guys can go. I'll never forget Pete. He was one of one, unique. Pete Rose, one of the true legends of the game and a friend we will dearly miss. Rest in Pete Rose, the hit king, always.
So yeah, that's a legend right there. I'm gonna probably play you guys a little bit more. Let's just see something. But no, Pete Rose, great hitter. I'm gonna.
Welcome back,
Let's just see something.
everyone. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have some heartbreaking news to discuss. News that is bound to hit home, especially for those of you who love baseball or have a deep appreciation for sports history. The world of sports has lost an absolute icon, a figure who wasn't just a player, but a force of nature both on and off the field. We're talking about none other than Pete Rose. If you followed baseball at any point in the past several decades, you know this name all too well. Whether you remember him as Charlie Hustle, the guy who seemed to give everything he had in every single game, or you know him for the controversies that clouded his later years, Pete Rose is a figure that everyone seems to have an opinion about. But today, we're here to talk about Pete Rose's legacy and the incredible impact he had on the game of baseball, because the news we just received is truly sad. Pete Rose has passed away at the age of 83. Let that sink in for a moment. One of the greatest hitters the game has ever seen, the man who still holds the record for the most career hits in Major League Baseball, is no longer with us. Regardless of where you stand on the many debates that have surrounded him, there's no denying the fact that baseball will never be the same without Pete Rose. Now, before we dive into the complexities and controversies that have followed Pete throughout his life, let's take a step back for a second and really appreciate the kind of career this man had. Pete Rose wasn't just any baseball player. He was an absolute legend, a generational talent who defined an era of the game. He was at the heart of one of the most dominant teams in baseball history, the Cincinnati Reds of the 1970s, also known as the Big Red Machine. This team was a powerhouse, and Pete Rose was a key reason for that success. Let's break it down for those who might not be fully familiar with Pete Rose's career. Over his 24-year career, Pete Rose racked up an unbelievable 4,256 hits. Let that number sink in for a minute. 4,256 hits. It's a record that still stands today. And quite frankly, it's hard to even imagine anyone breaking it. Rose was the kind of player who made it look effortless, but when you really think about it, achieving that many hits over such a long period of time is nothing short of incredible. And it wasn't just about the numbers with Pete. Sure, the stats are impressive, but it was his approach to the game that truly set him apart. He brought an energy, a passion, and a level of commitment to baseball that was unmatched. This is a guy who would sprint to first base after getting walked. That's the kind of hustle he played with. It was that hustle that earned him the nickname Charlie Hustle, and it's a name that stuck with him throughout his career because, quite frankly, it fit him perfectly. Pete Rose had a relentless drive on the field, a level of intensity that made it impossible not to root for him. Whether he was playing in the outfield, at third base, or even first base later in his career, he was always giving 110%. And that's part of what made Pete Rose such a beloved figure in the world of baseball. But as we all know, Pete Rose's story isn't just about triumphs on the field. It's also about the controversies that followed him later in his life. And as much as people love to talk about his record-breaking stats and his incredible career, they also can't help but bring up the lifetime ban he received from baseball. So let's talk about that for a second because it's impossible to discuss Pete Rose's legacy without mentioning it. In 1989, Pete Rose was banned for life from Major League Baseball after it was revealed that he had bet on baseball games while managing the Cincinnati Reds. This was a bombshell at the time, and it completely changed the course of his career, and really, his entire life. The ban meant that Pete Rose became ineligible for induction into the Hall of Fame, despite being one of the greatest players to ever step foot on a baseball diamond. And for years, Pete denied these allegations. He swore up and down that he had never bet on baseball, maintaining his innocence in the face of mounting evidence. But in 2004, Pete Rose finally came clean. In his autobiography, he admitted to betting on games, but he always maintained that he never bet against his own team. This confession opened up an entirely new chapter in the debate surrounding Pete Rose. Fans were divided. Should a player's on-field accomplishments be enough to secure him a spot in the Hall of Fame? Or should the rules, specifically the one about gambling on baseball, be followed to the letter, no matter how great the player? To this day, that's a debate that rages on, with passionate arguments on both sides. Many baseball fans and even some players argue that Pete Rose's legacy on the field is too great to ignore. They say he deserves a place in Cooperstown because, let's face it, when you're talking about the greatest hitters of all time, Pete Rose's name has to come up. But others believe that the rules are there for a reason, and Pete broke one of the most important ones in the sport. And now, with his passing, we're left to wonder how that conversation will change. Will people look at his career in a different light now that he's no longer here to defend himself? Will there be renewed calls to finally get him into the Hall of Fame? Or will his legacy remain as complicated as ever, a mix of brilliance and controversy? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. Pete Rose's impact on the game of baseball is undeniable, and his story will continue to be a part of the sport's history for generations to come. Now let's take a closer look at Pete Rose's career. As we mentioned earlier, he was a key player for the Cincinnati Reds during the 1970s, a period when the team was an absolute powerhouse in Major League Baseball. Known as the Big Red Machine, the Reds were dominant, winning multiple World Series titles during that decade. And Pete Rose was at the heart of it all. He was the kind of player who could do it all. He hit for average, he got on base, and he played with an intensity that few others could match. Over the course of his career, Pete Rose earned 17 All-Star selections, won 3 World Series titles, and took home 2 Gold Gloves. He was also named the National League MVP in 1973. One of the things that made Pete Rose such a remarkable player was his versatility. He played multiple positions over the course of his career, including outfield, third base, and first base, and he excelled at all of them. That kind of versatility is rare in any sport, but in baseball, it's especially impressive. It shows just how valuable Pete was to his team. No matter where they put him, he was always one of the best players on the field. And that's part of why he was so beloved by fans. People loved watching Pete Rose play because they knew they were watching greatness in action. But as we've already touched on, Pete Rose's story isn't just about what he did on the field. It's also about the controversies that came later in his life. The most significant of these controversies, of course, is the lifetime ban he received from Major League Baseball for betting on games. The ban has been a subject of debate for years, and even today, people are divided on whether or not Pete Rose should be allowed into the Hall of Fame. Now, to be clear, the rule that Pete Rose broke is one of the most important ones in baseball. The sport has always taken a hard stance on gambling, and for good reason. Betting on games can undermine the integrity of the sport, and Major League Baseball has made it clear that gambling is something they won't tolerate. That's why the punishment for betting on games is so severe. When Pete Rose was found to have placed bets while managing the Cincinnati Reds, the league had no choice but to impose the lifetime ban. For years, Pete Rose denied the allegations, insisting that he had never bet on baseball. But in 2004, he finally admitted that he had placed bets on games, though he always maintained that he never bet against his own team. This confession was a turning point in the debate about Pete Rose's legacy. Some fans and players believed that Pete's honesty should be rewarded and that his accomplishments on the field should outweigh the mistakes he made off the field. Others, however, felt that the ban should remain in place because Pete had broken one of the most fundamental rules of the game. So, where do you stand on this issue? Do you believe Pete Rose's accomplishments as a player are enough to earn him a place in the Hall of Fame, despite the mistakes he made?
I'm going to say this pertaining to this great player. Again, he had his batting average was 303. The guy said 4,256 hits, 160 home runs batted in, 1,314. And as a manager, he was 412 wins, 373 losses, 0.525 percentage. Again, he played from Cincinnati Reds from 63 to 78, then Philadelphia Phillies in 1979 to 83, Montreal Expos in 1984, and then his career ended at Cincinnati 1984 to 1986. I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. One of the greatest hitters of all time. Again, I don't think anybody's going to be able to have over 4,000 hits in their career. 24 years he was in the league. So, again, we'll see what, the Hall of Fame does now that he's passed away. He died at age 83, September 30th. So I'm just want to pay homage, and say, rest in peace, rest in power to Pete Rose. Great player. You can call him. He had his controversies like we all do in life, but he was passionate for the game. So, and you can like him, you don't have to like him, whatever. But feel free to check out more of my videos. Type in my name. It's Russell Mills, RussellMills, May 22nd, 2017. My first video called "Why Black People Settle for Less." So everybody, take care. Have a good day. Bye. Peace.